This country rarely makes the news, and when it does, it's usually about labor migration, the undisputed champion of poverty among all post-Soviet countries. No matter which number you look at, it's bad. GDP, salaries, freedom of speech. Tajikistan is a country of incredibly kind and welcoming people, quietly taken over 30 years ago by one clever old man, Emomali Rahmon, a man everyone here knows because his face is literally everywhere. In schools, in offices, on the streets, billboards with his quotes, and all of this is presented as useful information for citizens. Sure, how did people ever live without his face on every corner? In Tajikistan, Rahmon, practically a local deity, people even address him as Your Excellency.
پیشوای معظمی ملت پرزیدنت جمهوری تاجیکستان جناب عالی محترم امامعلی رحمان.
It's got everything. A ban on beards, weddings, and even pilaf.
I begged them not to make me shave my beard, but the police wouldn't give me back my documents until I did.
This is Tajikistan, a country the world has forgotten, and that's exactly why you can do anything there, especially if you're the president. Today we're going to find out who is Emomali Rahmon, and how has he stayed in power for 3 decades. A man who began as a state farm director and now holds the official title, Founder of Peace and National Unity, Leader of the Nation.
Сегодня основатель мира и национального единства.
Лидер нации, основатель мира и национального единства, лидер нации.
Лидер нации.
And if someone says the wrong thing about the leader of the nation, they can end up in prison. So how did this country become a family-run business? Why are millions of its citizens scattered across the world? And what happens next when the boss steps down? To understand how Tajikistan ended up here, we need to rewind a bit, and not just to the 1990s, but much further back. These lands were once part of powerful empires, the Samanids, the Timurids, the Emirate of Bukhara. This is where the first true Tajik Renaissance began. Persian poetry, science, and culture thrived here. There was a time when Tajikistan had its own voice in the larger story of history. And then the Russians arrived. First as polite colonizers of the Russian Empire, and later as the big brothers of the Soviet Union. Local elites were replaced with obedient party commissars. The language and culture were restructured. Tajikistan itself was merged into Uzbekistan. It wasn't until 1929 that the Tajik Republic was officially separated. When Tajikistan became a Soviet republic, there was almost nothing here. So the Soviet Union decided, let's build something big, and they did. In the 1930s, factories, hydro plants, canals, roads, but in the 40s, repression, deportations, collective farms. In the 50s to 80s, mass urbanization. Dushanbe grew, institutes, theaters, even a subway, well, almost. Aviation, factories, light industry, universities, the full package of Soviet infrastructure began to appear. They built the Nurek Dam, one of the most powerful in the world at the time. Dozens of plants followed, chemical, cotton processing, even machinery factories. This became a place where the great Soviet state rebuilt the friendship of nations, while workers from Dushanbe hauled concrete to projects in Moscow in exchange for stability, sausage, and wall newspapers with Brezhnev's face. One of the key resources was cotton. During Soviet times, Tajikistan was known as the Cotton Republic. Nearly every second collective farm worked for that white gold, but profit came with a price. Exploitation, children in the fields, forced labor, a centralized system where all the benefits went upward to Moscow. As a result, millions of tons of raw materials were exported, but there was a catch. On paper, it looked great. In reality, not so much. Tajikistan was, by every measure, the poorest republic in Soviet Union. And yet people still had a sense that tomorrow might be better. Some dreamed of making a career in the party, others wanted to study in Kiev or Tashkent, and some were just happy that the lights stayed on. Life was poor but stable. Wages were low, but jobs existed. Food was rationed, but at least it was there. Order was strict, but at least it made sense. Tajikistan stayed among the poorest, but it also had the highest birth rate in the entire Soviet Union. A typical family had 6 to 8 children. That was the norm. Tajikistan also had the youngest population in the Soviet Union.
Узбечка. А вы?
Таджик.
А вы?
Русский.
Over the years, the country's ethnic mix slowly started to fade, especially after the 1970s when Russification picked up speed. Some parents just wanted better schools for their kids, others hoped to move to Moscow, and some simply held to order, knowing that without it, things could get worse, and as it turned out, they were right. In 1991, Tajikistan became an independent. And while some neighbors had oil, gas, gold, or at least a plan, Tajikistan was left with mountains, a demoralized population, and a budget that rounded off at zero. There was no stable political elite, no strong army, and not even a proper flag. What they did have, on one side, the former communists, security officials, bureaucrats, all wanting stability, wanting things to stay the same, just without Moscow. On the other, those looking toward Iran and the Islamic model. Some wanted democracy, some just wanted power, cash, and a bulletproof Volga. And the country started to shake. In 1992, a civil war began. There were gunfights in the streets, looters, tanks, armed clashes, attacks on government buildings, and battles between regions. The situation in Kurgan-Tube was especially horrific. The kind of crimes Europe would classify as war crimes: over 100,000 people killed, 500,000 refugees, dozens of cities destroyed, and a completely destroyed infrastructure. The economy collapsed by 80%. The currency lost its value. The state had essentially ceased to exist. It was like a computer with the hard drive ripped out. And in the middle of this chaos, a new figure emerged, one we'll be talking about a lot more: Emomali Rahmon. So it's 1992, the country is in chaos, and then he stepped onto the stage, Emomali Sharipovich Rahmon, outwardly just a collective farm worker from the north. No background in intelligence, no fiery speeches, no ambition to become a dictator. In other words, the perfect placeholder. Someone meant to sit quietly and wait for the chaos to pass. Just temporary, very temporary. He looked calm, spoke carefully, avoided the press. Someone they thought could be replaced later, but later never came. He survived the war, made peace with his enemies, and surrounded himself with loyal security forces, bureaucrats, and Russian allies. Most importantly, he learned how to play the political game better than anyone else. When Rahmon came to power, the country's budget couldn't even cover government salaries, let alone schools, roads, or healthcare. To survive, people planted potatoes outside their apartment blocks. Children were dying for lack of basic antibiotics. In the regions, local warlords with guns, and Rahmon, as a politician, acted not harshly but pragmatically. First, he consolidated control over the security forces. Then, in 1997, came a peace deal with the opposition. After that, he gave government posts to former field commanders to keep them close, not across the barricade. He called for national reconciliation and even recognized Islam as an important part of society. At the time, that was considered progressive. Life was still hard, but year by year, things got a little more stable. People began receiving pensions again, schools reopened, and money from abroad started flowing in as millions of Tajiks left to work overseas. And most importantly, the shooting stopped. After 5 years of war, that alone felt like a miracle. Living conditions were awful, but at least people were living, not hiding in a basement with a rifle. In 1994, he officially became president with a new constitution and a clear message: I'm staying until the country is stable. Guess what? That stability never came. Since then, he's held one referendum to extend the presidential term from 5 to 7 years, and another giving himself the title Leader of the Nation and lifelong immunity. An official image built from slogans, portraits, and presidential decrees promoted non-stop for 3 decades. In 2015, he was officially declared the founder of peace and national unity. Now, insulting the leader of the nation, even in private, is a criminal offense.
Сегодня основатель мира и национального единства.
Лидер нации, основатель мира и национального единства, лидер нации.
Лидер нации.
Every government building is covered with his portraits, usually in themed sets: Rahmon in uniform, Rahmon in a wheat field, Rahmon in pilaf, Rahmon gazing into the distance.
The banner doesn't let in light or air, and it gives off a chemical smell that's honestly bad for our health.
In 2023, they even published an encyclopedia of the leader's thoughts. One city even put up a monument to a book supposedly written by Rahmon, just a stone book covered in gold, just in case anyone forgot what they're supposed to be reading. Everything is named after him: libraries, schools, medals, and even a grape variety. Rahmon got rid of the opposition, and with it, the idea that anyone else could lead. Elections still take place, but the result is always the same.
Emomali Rahmon is president of Tajikistan again. Everyone agrees and everyone is happy. I talk to my friends. They're all happy.
I went to the referendum, and I think everyone is satisfied with the results. Everyone who voted is happy.
After 30 years in power, it's only natural that temptation creeps in to hand things over to someone you trust. And who can you trust more than family? Family doesn't betray you. They don't stage coups while you're meeting with Putin. Take Rustam Emomali, the president's eldest son. Mayor of Dushanbe at 25, parliament speaker at 32.
Always be demanding. Keep an eye on carrying out my instructions. In your age, I used to be the director of a state farm. You're well provided for. No one dares pressure you, and no one tells you what to do or whom else. Don't go eating lunch at businessmen's houses. Visit the homes of workers, elderly people, and widows.
And thanks to changes in the Constitution, he can legally run for president at 30. And by the way, you can't quote him in the press without permission. He doesn't give interviews, doesn't speak publicly either. His daughters hold positions in ministries, embassies, and major corporations. One of them, Ozoda Rahmon, heads the presidential administration. The other worked in international investment, keeping everything within the family circle. Sons-in-law sit on oversight boards of state banks, state-owned companies, and power structures. Nephews, cousins, and in-laws running customs, energy, and telecoms. One investigation found that over 25 of the president's relatives hold top-level government positions. Some control the money, others the security forces, still others media. In 2013, Tajikistan saw a royal-style wedding Rustam Rahmon's, the president's son. The law officially limits weddings to 150 guests and 3 hours of celebration, but this one lasted a full week. The estimated budget around $1.5 million. President Rahmon doesn't pretend to be a humble public servant, quite the opposite. He loves the spectacle and isn't shy about showing it off. In September 2021, during a summit of the SCO and CSTO in Dushanbe, he hosted an unofficial banquet at his presidential residence. Among the guests were presidents, prime ministers, and entire delegations. The decorations included giant fruit sculptures, apple palaces, and watermelon fountains. All this while, the Ministry of Finance was publicly saying there wasn't enough money for education programs, a poor country with poor people, but everything around the president has to be grand and extravagant, especially when guests fly in from Beijing. Tajikistan might be one of the few countries where the state doesn't just tell you how to live, it also tells you how to look, how to celebrate, and even what to name your child, all to avoid offending national values. In 2007, a new law set limits on wedding expenses. The idea sounded noble, to fight poverty and vanity, but the result was typically Tajik. No more than 150 guests, no more than 4 cars in the wedding convoy, and no extravagant banquet tables. Officials claim lavish weddings lead to debt, migration, and social pressure. Parents take out loans just to avoid shame in front of their neighbors, then can't pay them back, so they go to Russia for work. In the 2010s, a new wave of modernization began as a visual one. Police went out on the streets, hunting for beards. Men were stopped, shaved by force, or made to sign patriotism pledges. If you have a beard, you're seen as a religious radical, and therefore a threat.
A beard is an imitation of ideas from the terrorist and extremist group Taliban, which is banned in this country. By growing a beard, you're basically sending a signal. Come over, we support you.
There's no official beard ban, but these days the only men who still have one are elderly locals. Eventually, the government moved on to names. In 2016, it banned foreign ones including Arabic, Islamic, and even traditional Muslim names like Muhammad or Ali. But it didn't stop there. The government defined what a patriotic Tajik should look like. No beards, no Islamic clothing, no Western fashion, no bright hair dye, no tattoos, and definitely no visible individuality. In short, you should look like a passport photo, preferably unsmiling. In Tajikistan, extremism is a very flexible term. You don't have to do much, just post something mildly critical of Rahmon on Facebook, and you're already on the police radar. In the 2020s, hundreds of people were detained for their activity on social media. YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok are periodically blocked, especially before elections or during protests. In recent years, dozens of journalists have been arrested, beaten, or forced to flee. Those who remain either stay silent or choose their words with extreme caution, avoiding any mention of the opposition, corruption, or the president's family, even in private conversations.
Akmal Rahimov expressed gratitude to the founder of peace and national unity, the leader of the nation, Tajikistan's president, the esteemed Emomali Rahmon.
Umarali Kuvatov was one of the few who openly criticized Rahmon. He founded the opposition movement Group 24. He talked about corruption, about the president's family, about the dictatorship. In 2015, he was shot in Istanbul. Officially, the motive is unknown, at least that's what the official version says, but everyone else already knows. The average pension is $50 and the minimum wage is around $170. The official living wage is lower than in many African countries. Over 27% of the population lives below the poverty line, and in rural areas it's up to 40%. The Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project published an article revealing how Rahmon's family companies were exempted from taxes. In March 2024, the president personally signed a decree that exempted 3 companies from VAT and import duties on plumbing and building materials. The exemptions were supposedly meant for health resorts and hotel renovations, but in truth, 2 of those 3 companies are directly tied to the family of Sohibov, husband of the president's 3rd daughter. Other businesses pay 18% VAT and a bunch of mandatory fees. The family firms, meanwhile, have their own discounts. A major player in this story is China. While the West imposes sanctions and Russia wages war on Ukraine, Beijing builds and lends money at interest. Most of Tajikistan's new roads, dams, and government buildings are built with Chinese funding. Tajikistan has an external debt of over $3 billion, of which $900 million is owed to China, and in 2011, Tajikistan officially handed over a chunk of land, over 1,000 square kilometers to China. They say China is an investor, but it feels more like it's just buying the country on a payment plan. By 2023, more than 1.5 million Tajiks live abroad. That's over 15% of the population. And if you include unofficial data, it's 1 in 5 or even 1 in 4. What sounds like simple migration is actually the backbone of the economy. Over 30% of Tajikistan's GDP comes from remittances, sometimes even up to 40%. No other country in Central Asia depends so heavily on money sent from abroad. Most Tajiks go to Russia. There are so many of them that Moscow is often called the second Dushanbe. In Russian cities, Tajiks are builders, drivers, cleaners, dishwashers. Someone graduates from university, learns languages, and dreams big, only to end up as a security guard in a St. Petersburg underpass. Theoretically, the government should do something, create jobs, support business, build an economy, but it's migration that keeps the system running. People leave, unemployment drops, money comes in, the budget grows. So the government doesn't fight migration, it depends on it. In Tajikistan, a successful person isn't an entrepreneur or a doctor, it's someone who brought mom a fridge from Russia, and the best path for youth is finding a way out. Emomali Rahmon has been president for so long it's hard to say if the country belongs to him or he to the country. He's been in power since 1992. Some citizens have literally never seen another president. Rustam Emomali is already mayor, parliament speaker, and heir apparent by every metric. Even the constitution was tweaked to align. Now you can run for president at 30, and Rustam just turned 30, right on cue. Everyone knows the throne is reserved. Tajikistan today is an example of how you can have every natural resources and still be run like a family business. So what happens next? Can things actually change after Rahmon? Let me know in the comments.